Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another episode of First Impressions, and as you can tell from my locale, it's another video one right at the movie theater. Same movie theater as Kong Skull Island, just different parking spot. It's the one I parked at last time. This is actually the one, like one of the ones right behind me. As you see, someone's in it. It's also a little bit later in the evening. It's Friday evening as I'm recording this, about 8:30ish. About to go sit in the theater, get my ticket, get a drink, and wait till 9:30 because tonight's film is Logan, the newest entry in the X-Men series from Fox, and Hugh Jackman's last outing as Wolverine. It's the end of an era, people. He's had a good run, 17 years, longest run as a comic book character thus far. One that probably won't be matched, but you never know. I mean, Sam Jackson's about to hit 10 years as his character, and if he goes 8 years after that, he'll beat him, but we'll see. Robert Downey Jr. is about to hit 10 years as Iron Man as well, so we'll just see. Anyway, like I did with Kong, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with these films before I cut to the fresh footage from after I see the film. Now, the first three films, X-Men, X2, and X-Men 3, The Last Stand, I did not see them in theaters. Last Stand I could have because I knew Jeff by that point. He went and saw it, and I just don't remember. I don't remember why I didn't go see it with him. So I think it might be funds and getting a ride. At least that's the best of my recollection. It was 11 years ago. I'm not gonna remember every single little detail like that, but I believe that's what it was. X-Men and X2 came at a time where I hardly ever went to the movies. Like I maybe went maybe once or twice a year at that point. Partially due to the fact that this theater, which in its original capacity as a Regal Cinema was a theater I mainly went to, was closed by this point. So my grandmother, Grandma Vi, who passed away 10 years ago now, who used to take me to see a lot of movies. She took me to see Waterworld. She took me to see The Phantom. She took me to see Wild Wild West, all at this movie theater. Took me to see Batman Forever. And there's a couple others. Those are just the ones that stand out in my mind. She did not like driving a long distance, so she wouldn't take me to the other movie theaters that were open. And my grandma that I live with, Grandma Sandy, she would take me to the movie theater over there every now and then. But it wasn't until they reopened this one that I saw movies a little bit more often. I'd still see them once or twice a year when we went to the other one, but I saw them a little bit more often when they came here, but not as often as I do now. Like when this place reopened, I know I saw two of the Harry Potter films before I started taking the bus. I saw the '05 one, with Goblet of Fire, which I think I mentioned last time was the last movie I saw with my grandma Vi before she passed. I saw Order of the Phoenix here with my younger brother and my other grandma. She fell asleep. In its original capacity, I saw A New Hope here when the special editions were being shown. There's another one right there. I saw it with the grandma I live with. She fell asleep. I know I'm going through some memories here, but I gotta mention some of them. Now, get back onto the main thing. Didn't see him, like I said. I saw X-Men 1, though, like in the year and a half after it came out when it was on home video. In probably the most unlikeliest of places, my 8th grade, I think. Yeah, 8th grade, middle school homeroom. Because my homeroom teacher, who I also had for science, for homeroom, he just showed movies. Movies that were like PG-13 at most. And that was one of the films that he showed. He showed other ones like Godzilla vs. Biollante, some other weird ones. There was this very weird one he showed with Christopher Lloyd in it, involving death and all that, which maybe I'll do a review of it one of these days, because it's a film that, yeah, I definitely should rewatch and review. But anyway, getting all off track. With X-Men, it was the first time I watched it. I enjoyed it. And then when I saw it again when I got the DVD, I still enjoy it. It's a film I still enjoy to this day. Maybe when this film gets close to DVD release, maybe I'll do an X marathon and do a video giving my current thoughts on the films and how I'd rank them. Then, once we got Netflix, back when it was mostly the DVD service before they started doing the streaming, I know, and some people are going to go, no, it was never like that, no. But yep, I was using Netflix all the way back then too. Anyway, I rented X2, watched it, really had fun with it. I mean, I did review it on one of my older channels. Those of you probably been watching them since then. Then I also watched The Last Stand. Now, I don't remember if I watched that when I got the DVDs or if I rented it from Netflix as well. Either way, I watched it. And I could see right from the beginning why a lot of people didn't like the film, as it is definitely the weakest of the three films. It has its moments, like the whole Wolverine, Jean Grey, Phoenix relationship I liked, and the scene where he actually has to put her down, that was an emotional moment. Uh, the whole Cure thing, Kelsey Grammer as Beast, need I say more? But you can definitely tell it was rushed because Fox was mad at Bryan Singer because he wanted to go make a Superman movie for Warner Brothers. So, like a jealous, spiteful lover, they rushed out the product, and that's what we got. It's kind of sad. Instead of waiting and letting Singer come back and make his version of the film, which would definitely have been vastly better, and I'm not taking that as a shot at the director they got. It's just he's probably not as good of a director as Singer, and Fox rushed the script, and that's the biggest cardinal sin you could make with a film, is if you rush the script. There's multiple times in the history of cinema where we've seen that happen, and the product usually is subpar. Halloween 5, need I say more? Now, I watched it, and like I said, I liked it, but definitely my least favorite of the three. And it was after that that I started to watch the films in theaters. X-Men Origin Wolverine was coming out. I'm like, oh, this should be interesting. Wolverine was always one of my favorite characters from the 90s show, because yes, I did grow up with the 90s show. I haven't seen it in years, but I always liked Wolverine. Bub. You know, all that jazz. And I did like Hugh Jackman's performance as a character in the film, so I'm like, yeah, this should be interesting. Don't really need a prequel based on what we see in 2, but we'll see. And it's a film that I did enjoy, but it is heavily flawed, and some of the stuff in it is like, really? That's their plan? This whole convoluted cockamamie scheme involving his lover? Might have been better if they actually killed her off, and then it was more of a straightforward revenge and started to try to do this weird stuff. And the whole trickster thing, and where he got the name Wolverine from. I like that. The whole story about how he got the name Wolverine, that I liked. And the whole dynamic between him and Sabretooth, making them brothers. I know some people weren't big on it, but I didn't mind it. And of course, sadly, that's the last time we ever got to see Logan and Wolverine together on film, because they never brought the character back for sequels, and they're probably not going to now. Kind of sad, and from what I hear with this film, that's one of the problems with Logan, but I'll see if I feel the same. But then after that, we got after that, we got First Class. I almost skipped a film, which both of those films I saw here, which was basically the beginning of Fox trying to apologize for their mistake with The Last Stand. And while I enjoyed the film, it was a step up from the previous two, but still pegs below the first film and 2. And I know some people, it's their favorite because of how they showed the X-Men characters, which I can understand, but no, not my favorite. I mean, I liked how it starts to show the dynamic between the Professor and Magneto, but it does cause conflict with the continuity of the previous films, and this is where continuity begins to become weird, which I guess that's to be expected since these are films based off comics, and comics themselves have been known to do this from time to time, so it's, I guess you could say, an example, inadvertently, of one art medium imitating another art medium, which ties into a couple films from now. It was, like I said, definitely my favorite since the first two, overall, as a film, but I'd probably watch 3 and Origins over just for entertainment value, but who knows, my thoughts might have changed in the last couple of years. Then we got The Wolverine, which I did enjoy. I know not everyone enjoys it, but I liked it. I mean, there are some problems I have with it. I mean, Hugh Jackman's whole reason for why he didn't want the film to be R. Bullshit. Especially considering the source material. I know the whole thing with Silver Samurai, some people not the biggest fans of, and based on what little I've heard of the arc, I can definitely see why, but I didn't mind it. I think it might have been better if they actually used the Silver Samurai from the comics and actually made the film R, and that whole scene where he's fighting ninjas, actually have him fuck up the ninjas. I mean, even if he has his healing factor back, you would think he's only one man. Maybe have them do that, or how about have him actually take a few out before they realize his healing factor's back? That would have been badass. But no, that would have been a good idea. Instead, we get some Jesus symbolism with Wolverine. And then, of course, we get the next one, which is Days of Future Past, which is definitely, of the more modern ones, my favorite in the series thus far. We'll see if that sentiment changes at the end of this video, but as of right now, my favorite of the modern ones. And it's basically the comic book film equivalent of one of those events that Marvel and DC have done from time to time where they shake up their universes, retcon certain story elements out of continuity, keep others in, and then change things up. Like when DC did the whole Flashpoint Paradox thing that brought in the New 52 reign, and then there's been a couple other ones. That's just the more recent one. They also did another one more recently, and I think Marvel's starting to do one now as I record this. But it was the equivalent of that, and it's basically their attempt to get rid of some of the old continuity errors. It works for some, not so much for others, but it was a pretty good film. I mean, what other film do you have Nixon in an X-Men movie? We gotta get these mutants under control. And of course, making Trask a midget, as his actor said, he's kind of a mutant himself, so he's a self-lover in a way. Finally having the Sentinels actually there, even though they don't really look like their comic counterpart, but that's besides the point. They're still a threat, especially with the slight change they seem to have done to them. Having a bunch of X-Men, and of course, like I said, rebooting certain films out of continuity. So looks like 2, 3, and all the other ones are out of continuity. Wolverine most likely is completely out of continuity, but we'll just see. They're probably not going to reference the events again, so it's out of continuity now. And Logan, from what I understand, is going to pick up from there. Then, after that, we got last year X-Men Apocalypse, which I did like. Not as much as Days of Future Past, but I did like it. I like it in between Days of Future Past and probably more than Last Stand. But like I said, I got to watch all these films in a big marathon before I actually rank them. But that's about what it was. Like the villain, like a lot of the characters. Some of them could have been better, more so maybe from a writing standpoint. But overall, I thought it was a pretty fun film, pretty good film. Now, out of the 3 past set X-Men films, it doesn't take advantage of its setting as much as the other ones. I mean, with First Class and Days of Future Past, you really feel like you're in the time period that the films are in, and that they're using it to its advantage. The 60s for First Class and the 70s for Days of Future Past. Now, with Apocalypse, other than the Return of the Jedi joke, which is definitely mudslinging by Singer, I did not get a good vibe that it was taking advantage of its time period, other than maybe some subtle Cold War stuff with the whole nuclear missile thing. Other than that, nothing, except maybe some fashion stuff, but that's really an aesthetic, not really taking advantage of it. And of course, we get to see how Xavier becomes bald. No, I'm not bald! Speaking of almost bald, yeah, I got my hair cut over the last weekend, in case anyone's wondering. And that's where we find ourselves today, Logan. So next time you see me, I will have seen it, and probably be a jump cut. And we're back. I just came out of the movie about a minute ago, so still digesting that ending a little bit, but wow. The film I liked. It's enjoyment on a different level than Kong. Kong was basically a pure popcorn film, whereas this one is a popcorn film, but also seems to have some mildly deeper stuff in there, but like a balance of the two. So it's one that you enjoy for similar yet different reasons. As you can tell, I did like it. I have to say it is kind of a fitting end for Hugh Jackman's run as Wolverine. Though that ending, not going to satisfy everyone, but with where they were going and what they did, I felt satisfied. Now, probably could have kicked a little bit more butt at the end, but with what they went with, I can understand why they went that way. Now, as everyone could probably tell from some of the trailers, the plot of the film is it takes place years later. Now, there's something I've been hearing online that apparently it's not set in the mainstream universe that they've been doing with these X-Men films since the reboot, but based on what I see, I'm calling BS on that. This seems to be in the new timeline made by the events of Days of Future Past. Instead of a dystopian society with the Sentinels, we got this weird society with no more mutants, which it's a little weird, and they kind of mentioned near the end that it might be because of that one company that we saw at the end of Apocalypse, but that begs the question, what are they doing? What are they putting in the water to stop mutants from being born? Because that's what it seems like they'd be doing, but or it could be just a coincidence. They never explain it, and it's one of those weird things like, alright, that's the closest explanation we get. No more mutants, so you can guess X-Men go kaput. All of them except Logan and the Professor are dead. No explanation given for this universe, so it's like, ooh, there's a lot of crap happening between the epilogue of Days of Future Past and now. Did this company do something? Because that's what it kind of hints at, but they never give an explanation. I think it's best left a little vague so we can figure out what happened to all of them. Well, they're the only two left. The Professor is developing Alzheimer's, and as such, you can imagine someone with the mental powers that he has. Bad combination, so Logan keeps him drugged. He's been working as a chauffeur for a limo company to make lots of money. He's planning on taking the Professor away, something to do with a boat. What his end game would have been if he actually got the boat, we never know, but I have a feeling it would have involved death eventually. Maybe a murder-suicide, or maybe just wait for the Professor to die and then off himself, because he has an adamantium bullet, which seems to be the story's only callback to Origins. But whether or not they're keeping that film in continuity is anyone's guess, but that's what it came off to me as. Now, near the beginning of the film, Logan is contacted by this Mexican woman who used to be a nurse, who has the child, Laura, that turns out to be Logan's daughter because of genetic manipulation. Now, she wants him to help her get this child away, and he eventually does inadvertently when the company, along with that main antagonist guy with the robotic hand, show up. And one thing leads to another, and Logan and the Professor are taking a road trip with the girl to take her to North Dakota. I think it's North Dakota. It's North Dakota. To get her away from the company. Now, as they're going, Logan finds out that technically Laura is his daughter because of the genetic manipulation. They had DNA from a bunch of different mutants, and they combined it somehow with the eggs of all these women that they used as, for lack of a better term, incubators. And because of this, the mutants that they took the DNA from are technically the father parent. They never mention if any of the mutants that they took this DNA from are women, which, just that thought alone would probably create a weird little dichotomy. But in Logan's case, obviously he's a male, so he's the father, and he kind of deals with that the whole film. And there's a scene near the end where he's even telling Laura, I don't know what you think I am to you, basically. That you better put that out of your mind, that people who get close to me get hurt. And it's a nice little scene at the end where they do actually accept each other as father and daughter. And that is a very emotional scene. There was a couple people in the back laughing, or at least like little tittering, it sounded like. It's like, really? You find this funny? An emotional moment between a father and his daughter, and you're laughing at that? Each their own, I know, but it's like, I don't see anything funny about this moment. Now, one thing I'll definitely say is this film does use its R rating well. For the first time in the live-action films, we see true Wolverine Berserker rage. I mean, in X2, and for that brief moment in Apocalypse where he was controlled, we did see a little bit of it, as much as PG-13 can push. And the Wolverine, there were hints that it could have been there if the film had been made an R from the beginning, and they had done things a little bit differently. But we have never seen true, unadulterated Wolverine Berserker rage until this film. And if the first scene where we see Logan, we see it because his car is attempted to be stripped, and he basically has to kick some butt. Now, one thing they pull in this film that they used in the last solo film, that didn't work as effectively in that film, even though it has a different storyline reason for, is Logan's healing factor. Now, it doesn't mention why it's a little slow until the latter half of the film. It doesn't come out and fully state it, but it looks like his healing factor is almost gone because of the adamantium. It seems to be poisoning him. And if you know anything about heavy metal poisoning, not a good thing. Now, I know some people are going to go, wait a minute, what about his healing factor? Shouldn't that balance out the adamantium poisoning? Yes and no, from my viewpoint. It will slow it down, possibly. And I guess depending on which continuity we're looking at and which medium, possibly make it a non-factor. But after a while, it might start slowing it down. And that's what it seems here, because he still has it, but it seems to be only working a little bit faster than normal healing ability, sans plot point drugs being used. Now, it makes things a lot more of a threat to him, because it's not like the previous films where he can just run into danger willy-nilly and tank it all, like, is that the best you got? Now, there's a couple moments in the film where he can do that because, like I said, plot point drugs, but for the most part, he has to think smart. He's like a cornered, caged animal. And sometimes animals are at their most dangerous when they're cornered. And that's what Wolverine is like in this film, especially when he's fighting. And like I said, combined with the Berserker Rage, good fight choreography. And when Laura gets involved in a couple of the fights, there's some cool moments. Like there's one where she jumps off his back and basically goes lunging at someone. And the last fight scene they're both involved with, I would like to call Take Your Daughter to Work Day. Because that's actually what ran through my mind when that was playing out, like, take your daughter to work day. Now, I also have another little thought about the adamantium poisoning him. And this occurred to me as the film was going on. You know what? I don't know if the writers thought of this or maybe like joked around with it, but this could be the butterfly effect from the time travel in Days of Future Past. Two things with it. One, Wolverine's healing factor could have been injured slightly by the time travel, because he was the only one that could make it in the film continuity. But you can imagine that put a lot of stress on his then present body. So maybe that affected his healing factor to the point that it lessened it to the point where the adamantium could poison him, and then the adamantium poisoning just made it worse. And the other factor is, when you change one thing, it slowly changes things around the timeline, like small things. Like, the Flashpoint Paradox comic arc is the best example of that. Flash goes back in time to prevent his mother's death, and what did he do? It changes a lot of other things. Superman lands in a different spot. Batman is not Bruce Wayne. Bruce is the one that gets shot in the alley, and his dad becomes Batman, and his mother becomes the Joker. Stuff like that can happen. So maybe messing with the timeline, not only did it make the future slightly worse in a different way, but with the whole mutants not being born thing, but it could have also affected Wolverine's healing factor. Combine it with the thing I just said before that, and then possibly in at least the film universe, the adamantium slowly working. Could be a combination of it. As a lot of my fellow LARPers like to say for moments like this, plot is a bitch. And it's back in heat at this moment. Now, acting-wise, Hugh Jackman, he's always been excellent as Wolverine, and this film's no different. And there's a few scenes in particular I'm like, oh, he's really flexing his acting thing. One of them, of course, is when Patrick Stewart's character, Professor X, dies. I know that's a major spoiler, but I have to mention it. Because the scene where they're standing by his grave alone, it's like, I don't know if Jackman's won an Oscar yet. I think he's been nominated at least once. Why he hasn't won one, based on that scene alone, just watching, it's like, why? He has the acting chops to win one. I know it's political stuff, but that scene alone shows. I mean, like you guys know, I think he should have been nominated at least for Prisoners based on that scene in the car alone. And you put those two back to back, you really see his acting depth. Patrick Stewart is always great. Even if he's in a poor film, he's always great to watch. He's one of those actors that even if the project is crap, you still watch it for him. And in his last turn as Professor X, he did a great job. Now, his character has a lot of different range in this film because, Alzheimer, going through mood swings and all that. There's moments where he's funny and there's moments where he's serious. In the last scene before his character is off, that scene's like, ooh, because he's remembering something that happened. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, he really feels bad. And then the last moment between him and Logan, that was a touching one. I did like there's some other bits of levity where he's a little bit more sensible, where doing some jokes in their cover act as father and son. You were very poor students, stuff like that. I got a chuckle out of that. The actress that played Laura, she does a decent job. Most of her performance is physical, just looking, standing, and all that, and then body language. But in the latter half of the film, she does talk, mostly in Spanish, but there's some English thrown in, and she delivers competently. I mean, she's not going to be winning any awards with this performance, but it was serviceable enough, and the back and forth with Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman, you believe them as a ragtag group, and like I mentioned, the father-daughter moment, they're acting together, that's what really sold that moment. And there's also a nice little moment after that I'm not going to spoil, but it was like, okay, that's a fitting end. Now, despite the trailers, the song Hurt is nowhere to be seen, but they did use The Man Comes Around at the beginning of the credits, and I'm like, that is apt. If you're not going to use Hurt, use The Man Comes Around. That's another Johnny Cash song, and I'd say fits Logan. Beast in Me would also be a good one, too, but I think Man Comes Around is a better ending song. Score, decent, I thought. I mean, I didn't really notice it, so it was probably a very subtle score, but it's apt for that. Special effects are pretty good. I mean, X-Men film, even in the worst of them, the special effects are always pretty good, except for maybe how they did the day scene on top of the reactor in Origins Wolverine, especially when compared to the Statue of Liberty. That was done a lot better, and that's a 9-year-older film, too. Show sometimes that the technology that is newer does not work as well, but that's a whole other argument. The supporting cast, they did a good job in their roles. The supporting kid actors, depends on which one. Some are better than others in there. The main villains, they do their job for what they are. Now, I don't know how faithful this movie is to the comic arc. Now, I know any parts of it that have to tie in with the larger Marvel Universe are probably not in there. Like, I think I heard that like Captain America or some of the other characters are in the comics, so obviously they're not going to be here. The thing that surprised me is, once again, no Sabretooth. Is like, you would think they would want him in this arc, but no. We get something close to that, but not exact. But you never know. Nothing else really when it comes to the bigger comic characters, other than the guy with the metal hand, and then the other main villain apparently is the son of the guy from the Weapon X program. Not obviously Stryker, but the other guy that was working with him. But I've also seen Apocalypse. I think he got killed in that one, so they referenced that. Makes me wonder what would have happened if they had used Jean's blood in this experiment. Whether it would have just made a strong psychic person, or if that whole Phoenix thing would have happened. That's a what-if thought there, but could you imagine if one of her offspring could have inherited the Phoenix thing? The whole thing, science, some things a man isn't meant to meddle with. Well, you could have gotten that there. And all in all, like I said, entertaining film. Similar yet slightly different reasons than Kong, but still entertaining. Unlike Kong, I'm not really comfortable with what I would give it a rating of yet. I'd say at least a 4. But, once it comes out on video and I watch it. One thing, though, I will say at the first half of this video, I can't believe I forgot to mention Deadpool, because that is technically connected to the X-Men films, but that one, yeah, probably in the middle somewhere. I have to give it a rewatch one of these days. I did enjoy it, by the way, and I never did a first impressions or a review video for it. I just never got around to it. I did enjoy it. Which, on a side note, they did show the teaser trailer for Deadpool 2 before the movie, and I was laughing my ass off with that. Like, Deadpool's just walking around and out of uniform. This old guy's getting mugged. He goes to a phone booth to switch into his costume, and they mockingly play the Christopher Reeve Superman music in there. Which, with that, I'm like, how did Warner Brothers let them do that, or did they not need their permission to use it if it's for spoof purposes? And of course, in the background, when he's changing Logan on the marquee, is like, okay, there's your Logan cameo. And since part of the plot of Logan involves escaping to Canada. Part of me was wondering, are they gonna? You know, it'd be funny is if Deadpool just showed up randomly in this scene. Jimmy Chuckers. I know that'd kill the tone of the film, but you know that would have been funny as a blooper one day while filming, just randomly like, I'm here. I would, if I was the director, I would have asked Ryan Reynolds if he wanted to play a joke on Hugh Jackman like that. But that's just me and my sense of humor. Like I said, entertaining film. If you are a fan of the X-Men films and you haven't seen it yet, definitely go watch it. Like I said, I thought it was a fitting end to Hugh Jackman's run as Wolverine. The ending, not everyone's gonna like it, but I thought it was serviceable, and it's definitely the best out of the 3 solo films. That's a little funny thing that they just kept getting, is that it started with crap, we went to decent, and now we went with awesome. Kind of weird how things happen like that. Usually it's the other way around if you think about it.